Hey, how's everyone doing today? Last week was my first video, and there was definitely some good picks in there. And first off, I just want to say thank you to everyone that watched the video, that shared the video, subscribed to my channel, and supported me. I really appreciate it, and it helps out a lot, and it makes me want to do this more. But, like I said in the first video, I'm ultimately just doing this because I like to do it. I like to have fun. So before we get into the week 3 picks, I kind of just want to review some of the stuff I did last week, give you some insight on what I got right, what I got wrong. Nobody's perfect. But last week was definitely a good week if you watched my video. Just starting off with the quarterbacks, I said Josh Allen was a quarterback that I definitely loved. He had a great game, and he came out and did exactly what we thought he was going to do. Ryan Tannehill against the Jags came out, performed, had a great fantasy day, especially for the price that he was at. And then some of my hate column that I got wrong. I did mention that Russell Wilson could still explode, and well, what do you know? He did. He had a pretty good game last week. Actually, he had a really good game. So, kind of got that one wrong, but it is what it is. And then Patrick Mahomes. The Chargers defense did pretty well last week, but ultimately Patrick Mahomes still got decent fantasy points. I don't think he returned his value for me on FanDuel, but he still had a good game, and I would have said if you picked him up, that was a good pickup last week. Going to the running backs, we really hit it out of the park with this. The running backs that I loved were Taylor, Kamara, and Henry. Henry's the only one out of those that didn't perform. Then my sleeper running backs were Mark Ingram and Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt had 2 touchdowns, and Mark Ingram had a touchdown. And the running backs that I hated were McCaffrey, Barkley, rip to them too, and then Clyde Edwards-Helaire. None of them had great games. So those picks were really good. And if you listened to any of those, you probably had a good fantasy day. So going to the receivers, this was probably my worst column last week. I said Hilton Robertson and Amari Cooper were the ones that I love. Hilton, being a Colts fan, I thought that we were going to do well against the Vikings like we did, but Hilton wasn't as involved in the game or really involved at all. So that pick was one of the biggest busts of the week. And, I think moving forward, he's kind of somebody I'm going to tread lightly with because we haven't gotten him involved as much as we should have. Then my sleeper receivers were Robby Anderson, John Brown, and A.J. Green. Robby Anderson and John Brown had pretty decent games for the price they were at. A.J. Green, unfortunately, he didn't have a good game as far as catching the ball. But if you watch the game or if you looked at the stats, he did have 13 or 14 targets, and that's exactly what I expected. But I expected a receiver like A.J. Green to haul in those targets, especially with Joe Burrow throwing the ball, and he didn't do that. So still a receiver I would look at in the future because of how many targets that he's getting. Just didn't work out last week. And, the tight ends. My sleepers were Jonnu Smith and Gesicki. Someone told me I said his name wrong last time, so I'm trying to get it right. But both those sleeper tight ends did really good last week. One that I missed was actually Tyler Higbee. No one can predict 3 touchdowns, but man, he had a great day. And I want to just say, before you just go putting him in all your lineups, look at where he was targeted. He was targeted inside the 10-yard line a lot. And the same with Jonnu Smith. I mean, he only had 4 receptions, 84 yards, but 2 touchdowns. So that's what gets him a lot of his points. But that's what tight ends are. That's exactly what you want, though. So just make sure you're looking at their targets, where they're getting them at, how many snaps they're in, and I think you'll make good tight end picks. The defenses last week, my big defense that I was high on for my sleeper defense was the Arizona Cardinals. They came out and they performed fantastic as far as fantasy goes for the price that you could get them at. And then the Niners and the Bills were the defenses that I loved. So, they did exactly what you wanted them to do. And the 2 defenses that I said I hated were the Pats and the Saints. We saw what happened with those 2 defenses. And let's just say I'm glad I didn't have them in any lineups. So, after reviewing week 2, I'd like to say we did a pretty good job. Like I said, we swung, we missed some, but we hit a lot. And that's what we're looking for out of this. Rarely are you going to get 100%, but what we're shooting for, in my opinion, I'm trying to get above 80% on my picks every week. And I think this week we did that, or last week we did that, and I'm super excited about, what's in store this week. So with that being said, let's move on to week 3. So week 3 starting off. Let's go quarterbacks. I got 3 quarterbacks in the love column this week. I'm ride or dying with Dak Prescott. He's been having a great start to the season, and they're going against the worst passing defense in the league in the Seattle Seahawks. So Dak Prescott for me at 8,500 on FanDuel is a lock-in for a lot of my lineups. I love that, and I will definitely be matching him with Amari Cooper in a bunch of lineups this weekend. Quarterback number 2, Aaron Rodgers for the Green Bay Packers. Got the Saints this weekend, and Aaron Rodgers has been doing possibly the best that he's ever done in his career for the first 2 games. People, including myself, thought he was going to kind of drop off this year. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong so far, and I'm excited to see what he does this weekend. And at 7,900, I think he's a really good QB on FanDuel. This is another quarterback that I love. I'm kind of on the fence about, but he's so cheap on FanDuel as far as quarterbacks that have good matchups, and it's Gardner Minshew. They're going against Miami, and I could see this being a toss-up game where he could either put up, 25 points, or he could put up 15, and, that's that. But I do like him here. I think it's going to be a good matchup and a good Thursday night game if that's a slate you're looking to play. The 2 quarterbacks that I hate this week, I'm sticking on Pat Mahomes. I do not like Pat Mahomes against Baltimore this week. That's going to be a tough game for the Chiefs, and I think for $9,000 on FanDuel, that's not something I want to spend my money on. There are other positions that I can spend up on, and with Dak Prescott available for $500 less, I would much rather have Dak Prescott in my lineup this weekend for fantasy. The other quarterback that I am on the hate train with this week for $8,100 is Josh Allen. Josh Allen's going against the Los Angeles Rams this weekend. I know Josh Allen is the second highest performing quarterback right now in fantasy football. I'm pretty sure second or third, something like that. But this week, I think he gets stopped up a little bit, and I think that Bills offense kind of takes a little bit of a hit, and I'm not saying they're going to lose the game, but I think it's going to be a tough matchup for Josh Allen, and I think I'm going to pass on him this week, and I won't have him in my lineups. Now, my 2 sleepers this weekend. These are 2 quarterbacks that I looked at pretty hard, and they're very cheap, and a lot of people are going to look at these quarterbacks and be like, man, I don't think I would have really played them. My first quarterback is Mitchell Trubisky. I know he plays for the Chicago Bears, and I know Mitchell Trubisky's been getting a lot of flack these last 2 years, 3 years, but they're playing the Atlanta Falcons, who've given up a lot of passing yards, and I have faith that Mitchell Trubisky at $7,500 can really return your value and possibly have a 25-point game. Great sleeper pick, if you ask me. But now one of my favorite plays of the week, and I think a guy that I'm going to have in a lot of my lineups for as low as he is 6,600 at the quarterback position. Dwayne Haskins Jr. against the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland's been struggling as far as when it comes to passing. I mean, you saw what Joe Burrow did against them last week. I mean, I know the Bengals didn't win, but they still had a lot of passing yards, and I like Dwayne Haskins here for so cheap, and I think I'm going to have him in a bunch of lineups. And I'm probably going to have him in a lineup with Terry McLaurin, which I'll explain why later, but I like Dwayne Haskins here. So, now on to the running backs. Running backs this week are aplenty. There are so many good running back matchups that I honestly didn't even know which ones to choose and put on here, and then I didn't know which ones I was going to say I hated. My 3 running backs that I love this week, Kenyon Drake. I love Kenyon Drake's matchup. I think that Kenyon Drake is going to flourish this weekend, and I really do expect big numbers. I know he's had a slow start to the season, but I think that you're going to see him do very well, and for his price tag of $6,500, I'll have him in a lot of lineups. I'm a big Colts fan. We saw what Jonathan Taylor did last week. We called it. He's moved his price up to $6,700 in FanDuel, but he's going against the Jets, and I expect that the Colts are going to be up in this game. They're going to run the ball a lot, and I'm going to go ahead and call it now. Jonathan Taylor is going to have another 100-yard rushing game with probably a touchdown, maybe 2. I think he's a solid play at $6,700, and it's somebody that I will definitely be looking at my lineups. My play of the week for running back for FanDuel at $7,400 is Miles Sanders. Now, Miles Sanders is going to have a great game this week. I'm expecting big things. I wouldn't be surprised if he eclipses the 150-yard mark. He had his first game last week. He looked pretty good, but I think this week Miles Sanders has a huge game, and that's somebody I'll have in probably most of my lineups in tandem with Jonathan Taylor. Now on to the running backs that I hate this week. I am not a big fan of Clyde Edwards-Helaire yet again, going against Baltimore at a price tag of $7,600. Not somebody that I'm going to have in any of my lineups. I will not be playing Edwards-Helaire. And if you are in a regular ESPN fantasy league, I know you drafted him high. But if you have some backup running backs that you can put in, I would probably put him in for Edwards-Helaire this weekend. I don't expect him to do well. I think at the max 10 points. And I'm not really taking into account receiving or PPR leagues, I guess, but more just from a standard perspective. I see him probably 50 rushing yards, and that's saying something. So the next running back that I don't like this week is Nick Chubb against the Washington Redskins. The Redskins have a pretty stout run D. I think they're only giving up 108 rushing yards a game, which is about 10 to 12th in the league. And with the two running back tandem, I'm not paying $700-800 this week for Nick Chubb. So that's another running back that I'm going to pass on. Now, my sleeper running backs. Now, these running backs right here, man, there are some studs this week in the sleeper running back and just in the running backs in general. But my first one, Joshua Kelce for the Los Angeles Chargers. I am excited about him. He's $5,900 on FanDuel. He got 23 carries last week. Look for that to keep on going, and I think you're going to see a big game from him. So if you're looking to save some money at the running back position, this is definitely the guy that I am going for. Next is James Robinson against Miami. James Robinson's really establishing himself as a lead running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Had a great week last week. I think it was 17 attempts, 106 yards, and a touchdown. He's at 6,400, I think, this week on FanDuel. And, man, I think he's going to be a stud tomorrow night. And I think tomorrow night's probably going to be a little bit high-scoring game. I'm hoping for it at least. And then my last running back is Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon has been looking okay so far this year, but I expect him to have a great game this weekend. It's $6,500 as a sleeper. I have him in a couple lineups. I'm not going to have him in all my lineups because he's not my favorite, but I think he's going to produce this week. So if you have him in any ESPN leagues, I consider him a strong flex option, just like I do with any of these other sleepers that I put in. Heck, I would even consider Joshua Kelce and James Robinson possible starters this week if we're comparing him to someone like Edwards-Helaire. So those are the running backs that I really enjoy this week, and those are the couple that I hate. Now on to the wide receivers. The wide receivers that I love this week. I think this week we're going to do better at the receiver spot. Last week, I feel like I kind of failed y'all. I didn't do as well as I wanted to, and this was the area that hurt me. So this week, I did a little bit more research on the receivers, and I think we're going to be better. So my first wide receiver that I love is Amari Cooper. And, as I said earlier, with the Dak Prescott-Amari Cooper combo, at $7,000 on FanDuel against Seattle on that passing defense, give me that all day. I am playing that combo so many times in FanDuel this weekend that it is something that I think you should highly consider, especially in a GPP or even a cash game. My next receiver that I love is Terry McLaurin at $6,700. Man's a beast. The Redskins receiving core, that's it right there, Terry McLaurin. Dwayne Haskins Jr. loves him. They're going against Cleveland. Sorry, Cleveland. I don't like Cleveland. As you can tell last week, I picked the Bengals to win. I think Dwayne Haskins and Terry McLaurin connect for not only one touchdown, but 2 touchdowns this weekend for Terry McLaurin. You heard it here first. I think he's going to have a big game, so I would put him in some of my lineups. My last one is DJ Chark. As long as he's healthy, Miami's got their hands full. This guy's a red zone threat, a big play threat, and just an every down threat. And Gardner Minshew loves throwing to DJ Chark. So for $7,100 on FanDuel, I really like Chark, especially if he's in the game, because I know he's ruled as questionable right now. But somebody that I would look at getting in my lineups. Receivers that I hate this week. The first one's Tyreek Hill. Still staying on that train where I'm not really touching the Chiefs because they're playing Baltimore this week. At $8,100, that's just too much for me. Now, the next receiver I hate, a lot of people are probably going to give me some slack for this pick. But I'm just going with the gut feeling here, and I'm going Calvin Ridley. Man, he has had one explosive start to this year. I think he's got 229 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. Doesn't get much better than that, but this week he gets slowed down. I think the Chicago Bears are going to slow him down a little bit. He still may produce, but he's not going to be putting up the numbers like he has the first 2 weeks, and I'm not paying the $8,000 on FanDuel to have him in my lineup. My sleeper receivers this week. So I know I already mentioned Amari Cooper, but one guy that went off last week, CeeDee Lamb. I love CeeDee Lamb this week. I mean, the Seattle Seahawks passing defense has been atrocious the first 2 weeks. They're the worst in the league, giving up at around, I think, 400 yards a game, maybe a little bit more. And, with 106 yards last week, CeeDee Lamb has a chance to explode. And he's only 5,600. So if you're looking to save at the receiver spot and pay up somewhere else, it's a great option to look at. My next receiver that's going to go off, or be a sleeper this week, I should say, is Tre'Quan Smith. Now, we saw what he did against the Las Vegas Raiders. So weird to say Las Vegas. Oakland is what it's always going to be for me. But they're going to go to Green Bay this week. He's 5,400. And Drew Brees liked him. He got a lot of good looks this past week. And I think for that price tag, if you need to put someone in the flex that is a low cost or save money at the receiver spot, he's a great option to look at. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Drew Brees has not looked like himself the first 2 weeks. So what? They're starting off a little slow. They didn't have a preseason. Drew Brees is a Hall of Fame quarterback, arguably the best quarterback to ever play the game. He'll start figuring it out, and Tre'Quan Smith will be a part of that equation, especially with Mike Thomas out. All right, on to the tight ends. Now, this is a tough one this week. I looked at tight ends for a long time because I couldn't really decide who I hated, who I loved. But I'll start off with the tight ends that I love, and he's actually the lowest tight end on this list. But I like Logan Thomas, and yes, they're against Cleveland. I like just Washington's offense this week. I don't know. For some reason, I'm fascinated by their offense, and I think they're going to have a really good game. Logan Thomas is only 4,900 on FanDuel, and for that price, I'm saving money at the tight end, and I'm spending up somewhere else. And I think he's still going to do just as good as a lot of the top tight end prices this week. Now, my next tight end that I love, if anyone's going to do good on the Chiefs this weekend, it'll be Travis Kelce. I know he's the highest tight end on FanDuel, but with all the other low picks that I mentioned for running back and for wide receiver, there's no reason that you should not be able to afford Travis Kelce and still have a great team. So I do like Travis Kelce. If anyone's going to do well on the Chiefs this weekend, it will be Travis Kelce. Now to the tight ends that I hate. After coming off a huge game against the Saints, I'm not having Darren Waller in my lineup this weekend. He's questionable as well. They're going against New England, who's got a decent defense against the tight end. And for 6,600, I'm not getting Darren Waller or putting him in my lineup. Now, the other tight end that's been going off so far this year, had pretty decent numbers, is Noah Fant. At $5,800, I will not have him in my lineup, and mostly because, Drew Lock just got injured. I don't know how this new quarterback's going to come in and throw to him, and I'm not going to risk it for this first week, especially for $5,800 when other tight ends are around the same price or lower that I think are better. My sleeper tight ends this week, I'm going back to the boy's name that I can't say, Gesicki. Playing against the Jacksonville Jags this week at $5,500. I think Gesicki could get 1 or 2 touchdowns and be solid for the tight end position. And I think that if you choose him in your fantasy leagues or on FanDuel, I think you're making a great choice. I think he's going to have a good week. Next is Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham for Chicago going against Atlanta at $5,100. I expect him to get some targets this week. He's a big sleeper for me, but I think that he's going to come through. He had a pretty decent game, an okay game for a tight end last week, and I think that don't be surprised if he comes out and has a touchdown or 2. And normally, I'm pretty high on Jonnu Smith. They're going against Minnesota has been pretty atrocious the first couple games on D, but they've been one of the better teams against tight ends. Granted, the teams they've played haven't utilized their tight ends as much, but Jonnu Smith, if he's healthy, he's one of my sleepers as well, and I would look at just because he's a huge red zone target, and with 3 touchdowns this year already, he's already tied his career high for touchdowns in a season. So, that's the wrap on the tight ends. I think there's some solid options there, and on to the defenses. So the defenses that I love this week, you already know who the first defense is going to be. I'm going to stay at home. I'm going with my Indianapolis Colts. They are right now the number 1 defense this year in yardage allowed per game at 208 yards. About 100 yards better than any other team, I think, somewhere around there. And, I love it. I love the matchup the Colts have against the Jets this weekend. And I don't think, if you have a defense in your league and you're looking for somebody and the Colts are on the waiver wire, go pick them up now and you play them this weekend, because I think the Colts could have a big week against the New York Jets. The other team that I like on that I love on defense this week at $4,300 on FanDuel, the Tennessee Titans. My sole reason, they're playing Kirk Cousins and the Vikings, and the Vikings offense has been abysmal. I mean, they just can't get it together. They have so much talent on that team. And from now on, from every week here on, any defense that plays the Vikings, I don't care if it is the Miami Dolphins, the Cincinnati Bengals, I am going to put that defense in my love column until the Minnesota Vikings prove me wrong. Sorry. Defenses that I hate this week. I hate the Pats. I am not playing the Pats this week. The Las Vegas Raiders have been on fire on offense, and I just don't want to touch them. For 40, I think it's like 4,900. I just don't want to touch the Pats. They're the second highest defense in FanDuel right now. I'm going to bypass them this week, and I'll save my money here. Next defense I'm not touching is the Bills, who are going against the Los Angeles Rams. Like I said earlier, I think the Bills get slowed down a little bit this week. And for that price, I think the Bills are going to get scored on as well. So at 4,400, I'm not going to touch the Bills this week. Last but not least, I only had one sleeper defense this week. There was only one that I saw that I really enjoyed, that I thought I would enjoy their matchup this weekend, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 3,800. The sole reason being Denver starting a new QB. The Bucs have been doing pretty decent on fantasy defense this year, so I like that matchup for Week 3. So, that wraps it up for Week 3 predictions. Like I said, thank you everybody so far that has supported me, that has liked, subscribed, and shared my videos. I hope to get more views. Like I said, my equipment will be coming in soon, and we'll get graphics and everything else. This is we're hoping to make this a big thing, and I can only do this by the help of y'all. Also, if there are any other suggestions on what you want to see, if you want me to go through and analyze each game on who I think is going to win the games, not only just the players, I can do that as well. So just, comment on the video, like, subscribe, and let me know what you want. And for now, that's all. As always, go Colts.